What happens when the quiet one stops being quiet? What happens when the soul you kept wounding day after day suddenly goes silent? Not with fear, not with weakness, but with power. A new kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to explain itself. You see, this isn't just about hurt feelings or emotional exhaustion. No, this is the moment everything shifts. Because narcissists thrive on control. They thrive on chaos. They push limits. They poke at the empath's heart again and again, thinking it will never stop bleeding, that it will always bend, that it will always stay. But what they fail to realize, what they never prepare for, is that the empath is not just soft. They are sacred. They are ancient. They are chosen. And when you push a chosen one too far, you don't just damage them, you awaken them. Something deep, something divine, something unstoppable. The light they once poured into others begins to turn inward. That energy that once kept others warm now becomes the fire that heals them and burns through every illusion around them. The narcissist thought they were breaking someone, but in reality, they were sharpening a sword, a soul forged through fire and silence. So stay with me, because you need to hear this: how the empath's quiet exit becomes the narcissist's loudest downfall. And if you've ever felt like you were too kind, too forgiving, or too broken to rise, drop a comment right now to claim your power back. Don't just watch this video. Witness what happens when karma shows up dressed as an empath. And hey, if you're finally ready to turn your pain into purpose, hit that subscribe button like it owes you an apology. They say silence is weakness, but they don't understand. They don't understand what it takes to feel everything and still choose peace. To absorb someone's storm while protecting them from your own empaths. Chosen ones, we are not weak. We are watchers, healers, and quiet warriors in a world that feeds on noise. We carry pain that isn't even ours. Generational pain, spiritual pain, pain we picked up just by walking into a room. And we carry it with grace. Because we know something they don't. We feel what others bury. We see what others deny. And still, we love, still, we forgive. Still, we stay when others would run. But here's the truth: no one tells you our silence isn't submission. It's spiritual discipline. A sacred restraint. The kind that comes from lifetimes of remembering what really matters. The kind that doesn't waste time proving anything. Because we already know. We already see. We watch them lie to our face and pretend we don't know the truth. We feel the betrayal before it's even spoken. We recognize energy before words are formed. Because we don't listen with ears. We listen with the soul. And yet, we're always the ones called too sensitive, too emotional, too much, as if carrying a higher frequency in a low vibration world is a flaw, as if loving deeply is a problem. But they forget paths aren't just born. We are chosen. And chosen ones don't just love, they awaken. We are the mirrors no one wants to face. The ones who bring light into rooms where shadows rule. The ones who make people uncomfortable, not because we're wrong, but because we're real. But we attract the broken, the masked, the ones who hide behind charm and manipulation. Narcissists especially, because they sense it. They sense our light, our healing, our softness, and they crave it. Not to cherish it, but to feed on it. And we see the child behind the mask. We see the wound behind the rage. And so we stay. We help. We pour. We bend. Until we break. Not because we are foolish, but because we believe in redemption. Because we know what it feels like to be misunderstood. Because we think maybe, just maybe, they'll change. But here's what makes us dangerous. When we finally understand they never intended to change. When we realize that our compassion was seen as currency. That our energy was never received, only taken. When the veil lifts, and we see it for what it was, that's the moment everything changes. That's the beginning of the end. But before that shift comes, the silence. Not the silence of fear. The silence of wisdom. Of awakening. Of a soul remembering its worth. We stop explaining. We stop defending. We stop trying to prove we're enough. Because suddenly, we remember. We've always been enough. That's when the empath becomes still. Not broken. Not numb. Still. And that stillness, it terrifies them. Because for the first time, they're not in control. For the first time, we're not reacting. We're observing. And they can't manipulate what they can't reach. This stillness, it isn't revenge. It's resurrection. It's the chosen one stepping into divine clarity, realizing that the love we gave away so freely was always meant to return to us. That our role was never to heal the narcissist. It was to survive them, rise from them, be refined by them, and then teach others how to do the same. See, The world misunderstands people like us. They see our gentleness and assume we're breakable. But they don't see the nights we cried ourselves to sleep and still showed up the next day with love in our hands. They don't see how we smile through betrayals, how we carry others while silently bleeding. They don't see the weight of our knowing, or the strength it takes to not let that knowing harden us. Empaths are not fragile. Chosen ones are not victims. We are souls forged in fire. We've walked through emotional hell and still chosen to hold space for others. That is not weakness. That is divine strength. That is what it means to be spiritually awake in a sleeping world. And yes, we fall. Yes, we get caught in cycles. Yes, we doubt ourselves. But we never stay down. Because inside us is something older than pain, older than fear, older than this world. A calling, a knowing, a divine fingerprint that no trauma can erase. We are here for a reason, and sometimes that reason is to walk through darkness, not to become it, but to outshine it. So if you've ever been the one who gave too much, stayed too long, forgave too quickly, this is your reminder. You are not weak. You are powerful, beyond measure. You are sacred. Your empathy is not a curse, it's your crown. Your silence is not a retreat, it's a return to your higher self. And when you rise again, you will rise wiser, stronger, clearer. Because no one knows how to love like you do. No one knows how to feel like you do. And no one knows how to rise like you will, so breathe, dear soul. The world may not understand your quiet strength, but the divine does. Your energy speaks volumes. Even when your mouth is closed, your presence shifts atmospheres. Your heart heals rooms, and the pain you've endured has not gone unnoticed. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the ones who tried to dim your light, they will remember your silence, long after they forget their own noise. The biggest mistake a narcissist ever makes is thinking the empath won't change. That they'll always be there, always soft, always giving. They see compassion and mistake it for compliance. They see forgiveness and assume it means permission. But they have no idea what's really happening behind the empath's quiet eyes. Because empaths don't fight back the way others do. They don't scream. They don't threaten. They don't play games. They simply feel. They endure. And for a while, they stay. The narcissist reads this as control. They believe they've won. They think they've tamed the empath, wrapped them around their finger, reduced them to a source of emotional fuel. And in their arrogance, they begin to push. They test boundaries. They manipulate with smiles. They twist truth and feed on the empath's constant need to understand, to help, to heal. They drain the very light they claim to admire. And the more the empath gives, the more entitled the narcissist becomes. But here's what they never account for. The empath's threshold is not infinite. It may be deep, it may be patient, but it is not eternal. There's a moment quiet and unseen when the empath realizes, this isn't love, this is control, this is spiritual theft. And in that moment, everything shifts. The narcissist, blinded by their own need to dominate, never sees it coming. They don't realize that what they took for granted was sacred. That the soul standing in front of them wasn't weak, it was restrained. That what they thought was submission was divine. Mercy. See, the empath knows pain. They've lived in it, breathed it, and still chosen to love. But when they awaken, when they truly see the narcissist pattern for what it is, it's not revenge they seek, it's freedom, it's clarity, it's the peace they never should have had to sacrifice. And that's when the narcissist loses everything. Not in a fiery explosion, not in dramatic closure, but in silence, in distance, in the emptiness left behind when the empath stops explaining and simply walks away. This is the fatal miscalculation. The narcissist assumes they'll always be forgiven, that the empath will always bend. But what they don't understand is that the empath wasn't bending for them, they were bending for love. And once they see there's no love, only ego, the spell breaks. The empath doesn't return the pain. They return to themselves. And that is what truly destroys the narcissist. Because for the first time, their manipulation doesn't work. Their charm falls flat. Their guilt trips lose power. Their control slips. And they are left alone, staring into the space where someone once stood with open hands and a healing heart. The narcissist fed on the empath's compassion like it was weakness, but it was a gift. A divine, rare, sacred gift. And now, it's gone. And in that silence where no more words are spoken and no more energy is given, the narcissist is finally forced to face what they truly are. Not powerful, not superior, just hollow, empty, because the empath was never just a source. They were the mirror. And now that mirror is gone, the narcissist has no more illusions to hide behind. They're left with their reflection and it terrifies them. So yes, the narcissist's greatest mistake wasn't being cruel. It wasn't the lies or the gaslighting or even the betrayal. Their true downfall was underestimating who they were dealing with, thinking they were breaking someone when they were actually awakening them. The empath doesn't just survive, they transform, they rise, they step into power, and they don't need revenge. Because the narcissist's karma is watching someone they once controlled become someone they can never reach again. Let that sink in. The very soul they tried to dim now shines without them. And no amount of hoovering, love bombing, or fake apologies will change that. It's over, not because the empath stopped caring, but because they started caring about themselves. So if you've been pushed too far, if you've given too much, if your kindness has been mistaken for weakness, know this: you were never weak, you were never foolish, you were never broken, you were chosen. And the pain you endured was not in vain. It was preparation. It was awakening. It was your soul remembering its power, and the one who underestimated you. They're already feeling the loss in silence, in regret, in the emptiness left behind. There comes a moment when everything changes, a moment so quiet, so subtle, that even the narcissist doesn't realize what just happened. But it's there, a flicker in the empath's eyes, a shift in their energy, a breath that carries more truth than all the tears they ever cried. It's the moment the soul says, enough. Not out loud, not with rage, but with a calm that carries centuries of wisdom. This is the shift they never saw coming. Because until now, the empath was the target of emotional sponge, the fixer, the forgiver, the one who saw the good when everyone else saw the danger, the one who stayed when others walked away. But something inside them has cracked. Not broken, cracked open. And through that crack, light pours in. Clarity, truth, power. The empath no longer absorbs, they reflect. They become the mirror. And what they reflect terrifies the narcissist. Because now, for the first time, they are being seen, truly seen. Not through words, but through energy. Not through arguments, but through silence. The empath no longer explains, no longer begs to be understood, no longer shrinks to keep the peace. Instead, they stand in stillness, and that stillness exposes everything. This is where the dynamic flips. The narcissist, once the hunter, now feels hunted by truth. Every manipulation falls flat. Every guilt trip bounces back. Every tactic that once worked now collapses under the weight of the empath's indifference. And that indifference is not bitterness, it's liberation. Because when an empath detaches, it's not to punish, it's to preserve. When they stop pouring into someone, it's not out of hate, it's out of sacred self-respect. They gave the narcissist chance after chance. They tried to understand the trauma, the wounds, the patterns. They carried burdens that were never theirs. They became emotional nurses in someone else's war zone. And they did it all with love, with hope, with faith. But now, the medicine has run out. The well is dry. The light they once offered now returns inward, fueling their own healing, their own rise, their own awakening. And suddenly, the narcissist is no longer in control. They're face to face with a version of the empath they never imagined, a version that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't try to make it work. A version that is whole, with or without them. That is the shift. That is the danger. Because for someone who built their identity around control, nothing is more terrifying than losing control of the one they once believed would never leave. But the empath didn't just leave. They transformed. They stopped trying to fix what was never theirs to heal. They stopped trying to decode someone who only spoke in lies. They stopped bleeding for someone who refused to stop cutting. And that shift from caretaker to truth-teller, from giver to mirror, comes the narcissist's undoing. Because now, the darkness is being reflected. And for the first time, the narcissist is forced to face themselves. No mask, no illusion, just the raw reality of who they've become. The shame they buried, the emptiness they denied, it all surfaces. And the empath doesn't even have to say a word. Their detachment is the message. Their absence is the consequence. Their healing is the closure, and nothing, absolutely nothing, is more triggering to a narcissist than the one they once controlled. Now walking in truth, walking in peace, walking away. You see, when an empath is in pain, The narcissist feels powerful. But when an empath is at peace, the narcissist feels exposed. Because peace is power. And now that power has shifted. Now the light is no longer something to take, but something to fear. Because the empath isn't just glowing. They're radiating truth, and truth is the one thing the narcissist can't manipulate. So if you're in that place, if you feel the shift happening within, you don't fight it. Don't shrink. Don't explain it to those who never heard you in the first place. You're not becoming hard. You're becoming whole. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming clear. And the shift you feel, that's not the end. That's the beginning. The beginning of your return to yourself. The moment you stop being the target and start becoming the trigger. And that shift is holy. That shift is divine. That shift is yours. No yelling, no chaos, no final, dramatic confrontation. Just silence. A quiet door closing. A space left empty. A light that once warmed, now gone cold. This is the revenge the narcissist never sees coming. Because they expect noise. They expect begging. They expect to be chased. They expect the empath to cling to hope just one more chance. One more explanation. One more moment to prove their worth. But instead, the empath walks away. No announcement. No fireworks. Just a calm, steady exit. And that, right there, is the most powerful revenge of all. Because narcissists feed on reaction. They thrive on drama, on emotional chaos, on the push-on that makes them feel important. And when the empath finally detaches not with rage, but with grace, they remove the one thing the narcissist needs most. Supply, emotional energy, attention, control. Without that, the narcissist begins to unravel. And it's not the empath's words that haunt them, it's their silence. Their healing, their peace. That's what echoes loudest in the narcissist's mind. See, walking away isn't weakness, it's strength. It's spiritual maturity. It's the empath realizing, I don't have to burn everything down to set myself free. I can just leave. I can stop explaining, stop fixing. Stop bleeding for someone who only saw me as a mirror, a sponge, a tool. The empath doesn't slam the door. They don't need to. Their absence speaks louder than any goodbye ever could. Because narcissists don't fear conflict, they feed on it. What they fear is irrelevance. Being ignored, being forgotten. And when the empath walks away without looking back, the narcissist loses their grip. They're no longer the center of attention. No longer the puppet master. They're just left behind. Watching as the person they underestimated becomes someone they can no longer reach. This is the quiet revenge. Not revenge rooted in bitterness or spite, but in healing. In choosing peace over pain. In reclaiming power without lifting a finger. The empath doesn't destroy the narcissist. They simply stop needing them. They stop investing in someone who never valued their worth. And in doing so, they take back every piece of themselves that was ever given away. And the narcissist, they feel it. Oh, they feel it. Not right away. At first, they laugh, they mock, they tell themselves the empath will be back, that they'll never survive without them. But days turn into silence, weeks turn into healing, and suddenly, the narcissist is no longer being watched, adored, defended. Suddenly, there's no one left to manipulate, no one to project onto, no one to gaslight, and in that void, they face the one person they've spent their entire life running from, themselves. You see, the empath's absence is not empty. It's sacred. It creates space. Space for truth to surface. For illusions to fall apart. For the narcissist's false sense of superiority to crumble. Because without someone to absorb their darkness, the narcissist is forced to sit in it. And that's the one place they never want to be. So, yes, walking away is the weapon. A silent spiritual sword. No screaming. No fighting. Just the gentle reclaiming of a soul that finally says, I am done. And let's be clear, this isn't about winning. This isn't about revenge in the way the world defines it. This is about closure that doesn't require chaos. About justice that doesn't require destruction. This is about becoming so healed, so whole, that you don't need to see them suffer, because you're too busy loving yourself. And that is what truly destroys them. Not your hate, not your pain, but your indifference. Your light. Your joy without them. If you've ever had to walk away from someone who tried to convince you that your love was weakness, know this, your silence is strength. Your healing is sacred, your peace is power. And the greatest revenge you'll ever have is simply becoming everything they told you you'd never be. So don't scream, don't fight, don't try to prove your worth to someone who was never listening. Just walk away with your dignity intact and your heart still beating. That's the kind of ending that writes a whole new beginning. And the narcissists, let them feel the emptiness they created. That is the consequence of losing someone who only ever wanted to love them. And that is the quiet. Revenge. This was never just about heartbreak. Never just about betrayal. What you went through wasn't just a toxic relationship, was a spiritual initiation, a soul assignment. And if you're listening to this right now, it means you're not just an empath, you're a chosen one. The pain you endured wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You weren't abandoned, you were being aligned, because your story was never meant to end in brokenness. It was meant to begin with awakening. The narcissist didn't break you, they revealed you. They unlocked something ancient inside you, a fire, a knowing, a sacred purpose buried beneath all the people-pleasing, the self-doubt, the overgiving. Chosen ones are not born into comfort. They are born into chaos, not because they deserve pain, but because they are meant to transmute it. They are placed in the lives of the broken, the manipulative, the emotionally dangerous, not to be destroyed, but to witness, to see the darkness up close, to feel it, to carry it, and then to overcome it, to walk through it and come out glowing, because once a chosen one rises, they don't just rise for themselves, they rise for others. For every soul still trapped in a toxic loop, for every heart that hasn't yet remembered its worth. That's your role, that's your mission. You're not here to stay broken, you're here to become a mirror of truth. Your scars aren't shame, they're sacred scripts. Evidence that you survived what was meant to bury you. You were sent into the lion's den to understand the lies, not to believe them. And now, with your healing, your wisdom, your voice, you become the one who turns pain into prophecy, the one who teaches others how to see the unseen, how to recognize manipulation disguised as love, how to set spiritual boundaries, how to return to self. The narcissist thought they had the upper hand. They thought your kindness was weakness, your patience was dependence. But what they didn't know is that you were being spiritually trained. Every lie made you sharper, every betrayal made you clearer. Every wound cracked you open wide enough for divine truth to pour in. And now you walk differently, speak differently, see differently. You no longer chase validation, you embody it. You no longer beg to be heard, you've become a voice that can't be ignored. That's the rise. The quiet, steady, unstoppable rise of the chosen one. And it always comes right after the fall. Because only when everything is stripped away, when your soul is face down on the ground, do you hear the voice that says, stand up. This is not where your story ends. This is where your power begins. And here's the deeper truth. Your healing is the narcissist's downfall, not because you seek revenge, but because without your light, their illusion collapses. Without your energy, their ego crumbles. Your detachment, your joy, your freedom, it all exposes what they really are. And that's something they can't hide from, because you're no longer their supply. You're no longer their mirror. You're something they can't control. And that truth is their reckoning. But you were never meant to stay in survival mode. You are here to lead, to guide, to shine, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of embodiment, of deep knowing, of divine power. You didn't just escape the narcissist, you outgrew them, and in doing so, you became living proof that healing is possible, that freedom is possible, that awakening is real. So don't see your story as a mistake, see it as a map, a sacred blueprint of transformation. Because now, when you speak, others will feel it. When you move, energy shifts. When you love, it heals. That's what it means to be chosen. Not perfect, not pain-free, but purposeful, anchored, spiritually armed with the kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through fire and still finding your light on the other side. This was never just about them. It was about you and what lives inside you. And now that it's awakened, nothing can stop you. Not the past, not the pain, not even the ones who tried to destroy you. You were chosen for this. And now, it's time to rise. There's a silence that doesn't soothe. It haunts, it crawls into the bones. It echoes in the spaces where control once reigned. And that silence is the final mirror. The moment when the narcissist is finally left alone, not abandoned, not discarded, but exposed. No more reactions to manipulate. No more love to twist. No more empath to absorb the shame. Just emptiness. And inside that emptiness, for the first time, they see it. The truth. Because the empath, their favorite mirror, their emotional sponge, their light has finally stepped away. No grand exit, no chaos, just quiet. And with that quiet comes something far more terrifying than being hated. They are forgotten, irrelevant, powerless. And in that powerlessness, the narcissist comes face to face with the one person they've been running from their entire life. Themselves. This is what they never expected. They believed the game would never end, that the empath would always bend, always forgive, always absorb the blame. But the empath has changed. They no longer carry guilt that doesn't belong to them. They no longer shrink to fit someone else's comfort. They no longer play a role in a story that was written to destroy them. They've reclaimed the pen, and they've written themselves out of the narcissist's narrative. And now, the narcissist stands alone in the mess they created. And there is no one left to convince that it wasn't their fault. No one left to gaslight into believing they were the victim. No one left to feed the illusion. The projection shatters. The mask slips. And the truth is, all that remains. They are the villain. Not in someone else's version of events, but in reality. A reality they can no longer rewrite. For the narcissist, truth is not just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. They've built their entire identity around escaping it. Around playing the role of the misunderstood hero, the charming lover, the wounded soul. And the empath's presence allowed that illusion to survive. As long as the empath stayed, there was someone to validate the lie. But now that presence is gone. And what's left behind is a void. Not just in the room, but in the narcissist's own identity. Because who are they? Without someone to control. Who are they? Without someone to blame. Who are they? When no one is looking. The mirror doesn't lie. And now, it doesn't reflect love or admiration or obedience. It reflects the damage. The manipulation. The cycles. The truth. And here's the twist. The narcissist may try to run from it. They may look for a new source, a new empath, a new supply. But something's different now. Something has shifted. Because once the final mirror cracks, once they've been truly seen by someone who no longer fears them, they can't unsee themselves either. No matter how deep they bury it, no matter how fast they run, they remember. They remember how the empath stopped reacting, how they started responding with silence, how their eyes, once filled with softness, were now unreadable, how their love turned into neutrality. And that neutrality, that's the wound they can't heal, because it means they no longer have power. They no longer matter. And for someone who has always needed control to feel alive, that realization is devastating. The narcissist is now stuck in the house they burned down. There are no doors left open, no windows to escape through, just ashes and smoke. The same smoke they used to blind others now chokes them. The roles have reversed. The light they once mocked, dismissed, and fed on, now shines somewhere else far from them, brighter than ever, and that light is not coming back. Because the empath didn't just leave, they healed, they transformed. They became everything the narcissist pretended to be: self-aware, whole, fearless. And now, every time the narcissist looks at a new connection, a new supply, a new target, they remember the one who got away, the one who saw it all, the one who knew too much, the one who left not because they stopped loving, but because they started loving themselves more. That's the moment the narcissist is haunted, not by the empath's anger, but by their peace. Not by their words, but by their silence. Not by revenge, but by release. Because the empath didn't try to destroy them, they simply stopped participating. And that is the real destruction. That's what happens when the final mirror is held up. There's no drama, no scene, just the quiet echo of truth. And that echo follows them to every room, to every relationship, to every lonely night when the noise fades and the mask falls. Because no matter how many people they charm, no matter how many new victims they find, they will always carry the memory of the one who saw them clearly and chose freedom. They'll remember the strength it took for the empath to walk away, the power in their goodbye, the mirror they refused to look into, now etched into memory. And here's the part that stings the most. The empath was never trying to win, never trying to prove anything. They just wanted love, real love. And when they realized that was never going to come from the narcissist, they left and they never looked back. That's the kind of truth you don't recover from. Because when the empath stops absorbing the shame, the blame, the chaos, the narcissist is left with nothing but themselves. And for the first time, there's no one left to blame for the destruction. No one left to manipulate the story. No one left to silence the truth. Just them. Just the mask and the broken reflection behind it. This is the spiritual consequence. The karma that doesn't come with thunder or lightning, but with stillness, with silence, with clarity. This is the final mirror. And once it's shown, it can never be unseen. So if you are the empath, if you are the one who gave, endured, forgave, stayed, and finally walked away, understand this. Your healing is not just personal, it is cosmic. It is disruptive. It is the reckoning. And your silence. That is the mirror they will carry forever. You didn't just survive them. You ended the illusion. You broke the cycle. You became the truth. And for someone who built their power on lies, there is no greater punishment than that. They never saw it coming. Not because the signs weren't there. Not because they were blind. But because they were arrogant enough to believe that the light would always stay. No matter how much darkness they brought. For so long, the empath, the chosen one, was the one holding everything together. The one absorbing all the chaos. All the blame. All the guilt. The one offering peace while walking through emotional war zones. The one wiping tears they didn't cause. Fixing wounds they didn't create. And staying quiet when they had every right to scream. That's the silent strength people don't understand. You see, the world looks at kindness and sees softness. But what they miss, what the narcissist missed, is that this silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. It was ancient wisdom wrapped in quiet mercy. It was a soul choosing to love even when it wasn't returned. Choosing to stay long after it became unbearable. Because empaths don't just love with emotion, they love with purpose. With hope. With sacred intention. But even the strongest souls get tired. Even the deepest hearts reach a limit. And when that moment comes, when the empath soul whispers enough, the shift begins. Not with an explosion. Not with a breakdown. But with stillness. With a silence so powerful, it shakes the very foundation of everything the narcissist built. Because for the first time, the empath doesn't explain. They don't defend. They don't plead to be understood. They just watch. They observe. And that's when the mask starts to crack. The narcissist, used to being the puppeteer, suddenly finds the strings are gone. There's no more reaction to feed off, no more emotional chaos to control. No more guilt trips that land. Because the empath wants the targetees, now the mirror. And that mirror doesn't reflect fantasy anymore. It reflects truth. It shows the manipulator their own face, the taker their own emptiness, the abuser their own fear. And in that reflection, they see something they've never seen before, themselves. Stripped of charm, stripped of the illusion, stripped of power. And it terrifies them, because they're not used to being seen not like this. They've spent their whole life performing, shape-shifting, playing roles. But this time, the audience is gone. The empath has walked away. Not with hatred, not with vengeance, but with peace. That's the day the mask cracks. The moment when everything they pretended to be begins to fall apart. Because there's no one left to convince, no one left to blame, no one left to keep the illusion alive. The mirror has spoken, and its silence is louder than any scream. And here's what makes it unbearable for the narcissists. The empath never tried to destroy them. They only ever tried to love them, to understand them, to stay even when it cost them everything. The narcissist thought that was weakness. But it was sacred strength, spiritual strength, the kind you can't fake, the kind that endures long after the storm has passed. But once that strength turns inward, once the empath stops pouring into someone who only takes the light, moves, it no longer shines for the narcissist. It no longer warms them. It no longer heals them. And the cold sets in. Suddenly, the person who needed control to feel alive feels invisible, irrelevant, powerless. Because now, their mask is in pieces, and no one's there to help pick them up. The empath won't rescue them this time. They finally learned the sacred lesson. Not everyone can be saved. Not because they aren't worthy, but because they don't want to be. Because they choose ego over healing, control over connection, power over love. And the empath, they're done playing savior. Done explaining their value. Done trying to rescue someone who keeps choosing to drown. This is the divine turning point, where the chosen one no longer sees themselves as broken, but as becoming where they realize their heart isn't a weakness, it's a weapon. A spiritual sword forged in pain, sharpened by betrayal, and now aimed at truth. And that truth, they were never too sensitive. They were never too emotional. They were never too much. They were always too real, too deep, too light-filled for someone who thrives in shadows. The narcissist wanted the light, but hated the truth that came with it. And now, they're left in darkness, Not because the empath wanted revenge, but because they reclaimed their light. They stopped absorbing shame, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped explaining their worth to someone who never intended to see it. And in doing so, they became the final mirror, the one that doesn't reflect a mask, but the monster behind it. And here's what breaks the narcissist most. They can never wear that mask again, not fully. Because now, they know it's fake. They've seen the cracks, they've tasted the truth. And no matter how many new faces they charm, that reflection follows them. It shows up in the quiet dot, in the spaces where the empath used to be, in the moments when they reach for control and realize no one's playing anymore. That is the consequence. Not anger, not revenge, not rage. But emptiness. A void that used to be filled with the warmth of someone who would have done anything to love them right. And now, it's gone. Not because the empath stopped caring, but because they started caring about themselves more. Because they finally understood. Their energy is sacred. Their love is sacred. Their peace is sacred. And not everyone deserves access to it. Especially not someone who treats it like a toy. The narcissist thought they won, that they broke someone, but all they did was awaken them. All they did was reveal their own truth. And now, they are the only ones left to sit with it, to stare into the mirror they spent so long avoiding. And that mirror, it doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, it doesn't care about appearances. It reflects what's real, and what's real is this. The empath wasn't destroyed, they were refined, reborn, elevated, and the narcissist, they were never powerful. Just fed off someone else's light. But that light, it's gone now. Not lost, not dimmed, just returned to its rightful owner. And in that return is the most devastating truth of all. The narcissist never had control, they just had access. And now, access denied. That's the day the mask cracks. That's the day the show ends. That's the day the villain faces their own reflection and finds no one left to save them from it. Not even the one who once loved them the most. Not even the chosen one. Because now, they've chosen themselves. They thought you'd never leave. Not really. Even when you threatened to walk, even when your heart was heavy and your spirit weary, they believed you'd stay. Because that's what you always did, stay. Through the lies, the gaslighting, the mind games masked as love, you stayed. You reasoned. You forgave. You tried harder. Not because you were weak, but because you loved deeply. You hoped that something in them would change. That if you just gave a little more, bent a little further, made yourself smaller just one more time, maybe they'd finally see your worth. But they never did. Not really. And what broke them in the end wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't your rage. It wasn't a dramatic ending they could twist into a victim narrative. It was your silence. It was your calm. It was the unspoken, undeniable truth that echoed louder than any scream. I'm done. You left. Quietly. Without chaos. Without needing closure. And in that silence, they shattered. Because narcissists don't fear losing you, they fear losing control of you. They fear the moment their words no longer work. Their guilt trips fall flat. Their charm feels empty. They fear your detachment, your peace, your distance. Because your silence strips them of the one thing they crave the most. Relevance. You were the mirror that made them feel alive, even in their darkest manipulation. You reflected back the illusion they created. But when you left, the mirror vanished and all they were left with was themselves. And they hated what they saw. They will tell themselves stories to soothe their ego. That you were unstable, ungrateful, too emotional. They'll say you gave up too soon, that you were the problem. But none of those lies can quiet the new emptiness inside them. Because you took something with you when you left. Not just your presence, but your energy, your belief in them, your patience, your light. And for someone who fed on all of that, your absence is starvation. It's withdrawal. It's death by emotional dehydration. Because there's no new supply that compares to the soul they drained for so long. And here's the secret they'll never admit. They didn't believe you'd ever find your power. They thought you'd keep coming back. That your compassion would keep you bound. That your empathy would always override your boundaries. But you broke the pattern. You chose yourself. And that wasn't just healing. It was a revolution. You rewrote the script. You stepped out of the role they cast you in and reclaimed your voice, not by screaming, but by going silent. By walking away. That silence. It was your loudest statement. It said, you no longer have access to me. And in that absence, their delusions crumbled. Because they weren't prepared for a world where you no longer orbit them. Where your energy no longer bends toward their chaos. where your heart no longer carries their weight. You see, the most powerful thing an empath can do is stop speaking, stop explaining, stop justifying their worth to someone committed to misunderstanding them. Because when words no longer flow, when attention no longer feeds the monster, when love no longer sacrifices itself for scrap sats, when the narcissist begins to collapse, slowly, quietly, in the same silence they want us to punish you. So don't underestimate what you did. You left and they broke, not because you hurt them, but because they could no longer hurt you. That's the power of your silence, the power of finally choosing peace over potential, the power of saying no more without ever saying a word. And that is the kind of power they will never understand, because they confused your kindness with weakness. They mistook your patience for permission. And now, the one they thought they broke walks away unshaken, and the one who thought they were invincible is left in ruins, not because you destroyed them, but because you saved yourself. They didn't know it then, not when you were wiping their tears, not when you were absorbing their anger like a storm drain takes the rain, not when you were sacrificing your own peace to keep them emotionally steady. They thought your presence was ordinary, your love replaceable, your energy endless. But it wasn't, and it never was. You were the light all along, the reason their world didn't collapse sooner, the reason their demons stayed quiet, even if only for a while. But narcissists don't see the light when it's glowing for them. They only notice its absence when it vanishes. When the room goes dark, when the warmth is gone, and the silence feels cold. That's when it hits them. That's when they realize it wasn't their charm, their control, or their power keeping everything together. It was you. You were the one illuminating the path, the one softening their edges, the one making their darkness tolerable. You were the safety, the healer, the soul that made their brokenness feel less threatening. And when you walked away, they didn't just lose a person, they lost their illusion of control. They lost the source they fed on. They lost the anchor that kept their storm from destroying everything. And now, in the stillness you left behind, they're forced to sit in their own shadow. No distraction, no reflection, no light. And that's when it begins, the realization, the regret, the truth. They look back and remember how you listened when they didn't deserve to be heard, how you held space when they gave you silence, how you poured out your love while they offered confusion. You were never just a partner, you were the source, the steady flame in the middle of their chaos. And now, it's gone. They tried to replace it, to recreate the feeling with someone new, but it never lands the same. It's never as soft, never as safe, never as deep, because what you gave wasn't fake. It wasn't transactional, it was divine. They remember now how you brought clarity to their confusion, how your laughter warmed the coldest days, how your spirit carried wisdom they couldn't even begin to understand. They remember how everything made more sense when you were around, how they felt seen, truly seen for, maybe the first time in their life. And that realization is brutal, because now you're not here to reflect that light anymore. You're no longer dimming yourself to make them feel strong. You're no longer available for draining dot. You were the light, and they mistook you for a flicker, but you were the sun. And now they sit in shadow. They might not say it out loud. Their pride won't let them, but deep down, they know, they feel the difference. Their world is dimmer without you. You were never the weak one. You were never the fool. You were never the one being rescued. You were the rescuer, the energy source, the reason they even felt powerful in the first place. Now you shine somewhere else. Freely, fully no longer trapped in their storm. And they're left to learn that they never stood in their own light. They only stood in yours. They always had someone to blame. That was their safety net, their emotional crutch, their escape route. Whenever something cracked in their perfect facade, there was always someone standing nearby to take the fall, someone to hold responsible, someone to project onto, someone who would soak up all the guilt, all the shame, all the consequences of their actions. And for a long time, that someone was you, the empath, the light, the soft soul who tried to love them whole. You didn't just forgive them, you tried to understand their pain. You justified their cruelty. You twisted yourself into pieces, trying to keep the peace. You bent your truth to protect theirs. You became the reason they didn't have to face themselves. But now, you're gone. And with your absence comes the one thing they never prepared for: accountability. There's no one left to fix it. No one left to soothe it. No one left to say, "It's okay, I understand." Because you've stopped understanding the unacceptable. You've stopped giving your grace to someone who mistook it for permission. You've walked away not in anger, not in revenge, but in stillness, in resolve, in quiet, sacred detachment. And that silence, that absence, becomes the unraveling they never expected, because now, when the chaos hits, when the cracks start to widen and the weight of their choices comes crashing down, there's no buffer, no emotional cushion, no empathic soul to take the hit, just them, raw, exposed, alone, and for the first time, they have to look in the mirror and see what you always saw but refused to name. They are the problem. No one left to distract. No one left to gaslight. No one left to spin the story. Just the truth. And the truth doesn't care about charm. It doesn't care about trauma excuses or half-hearted apologies. It simply is. And what it reveals is devastating. Because underneath all the blame shifting and ego stroking, there is a deeply fractured being, one who has spent their entire life building castles on sand. One who survives not through love, but through manipulation. One who doesn't know who they are without someone else to control. And now, there's no one left to play that role. No one left to edit the script. No one left to perform for, and the show, without an audience, collapses. That's the final breakdown. Not the loud kind filled with screaming and shattered glass, but the silent kind. The kind where the weight of truth suffocates slowly, quietly. The kind that doesn't just hurt the ego, it dismantles it. You see, narcissists are addicted to power, but it's borrowed power. It's extracted from others. And when you left, you took that power with you. Because it was never theirs to begin with. It came from your presence, your loyalty, your belief in them. And now, without that reflection, you don't know who they are. They try to pretend they're fine, that they've moved on, that you were never that important. But late at night, when the distractions fade and the world goes quiet, they hear it. The echo of your silence. The weight of everything they did wrong. The shadow of the breakdown creeping in. They may seek new supplies, someone else to feed their ego. And maybe, for a while, it works. Maybe they find someone to adore them again. To believe the lies. To play the role you once did. But it never lasts. Because you awakened something. You disrupted the illusion. You broke the cycle. And no matter how hard they try, they can't recreate what they had with you. Not because you were weak, but because you were rare. A once-in-a-lifetime kind of soul. A soul that offered unconditional love in a world built on conditions. A soul that gave, not to control, but to heal. And when that kind of energy disappears, it leaves a void that no amount of attention or flattery can fill. This is when the narcissist spirals. Not because you punish them, but because you're no longer available to rescue them from themselves. You're no longer emotionally entangled. You no longer exist inside their distorted story. And they are forced to live with the consequences of everything they denied, every lie, every manipulation. Every time they pushed you away thinking you'd come back, they finally understand you're not coming back. And they finally realize they were the villain all along. Not in your story, but in their own. And that is the most terrifying mirror of all. Because the one thing narcissists can't survive is seeing themselves without a mask. They've built their entire identity around the ability to deceive, to seduce, to charm their way out of accountability. But when that mask cracks and no one is there to glue it back together, they're left with something they've avoided their entire lives. The truth. And the truth is, they lost the one person who genuinely loved them. Not for their image, not for their potential, but for who they could have been if they had chosen to grow. But they didn't choose growth. They chose control. They chose fear. They chose the illusion. And now the illusion is gone, and the only thing left is the breakdown. Not because you broke them, but because they finally broke themselves. You see, healing doesn't always come wrapped in forgiveness and closure. Sometimes, it comes in walking away. Sometimes, the most profound healing happens in the quiet moments when you no longer explain your worth. When you no longer plead to be understood. When you no longer make room for someone who only brings chaos. That is what breaks the narcissist. Not revenge. Not retaliation. Just your peace. Just your absence. Just the void left behind when someone who was never meant to carry the weight finally puts it down. And now, the narcissist has no one left to blame. They are surrounded by the ruins of their own behavior. And for once, they are forced to live inside it. With no one left to clean it up. No more scapegoats. No more distractions. Just the consequences. And here's the spiritual truth. Your silence was not an ending. It was an initiation. You didn't just walk away. You ascended. You took back your energy. You reclaimed your light. You became everything they tried to convince you weren't. And they became everything they tried to hide. So if you ever doubt the power of your exit, don't. Because the day you stopped playing the role they wrote for you was the day their script fell apart. You leaving wasn't their punishment. You healing was. You no longer giving access to your soul was. And now, there's no one left to blame. Only the truth. Only the silence. Only the breakdown that follows the loss of the one thing they never deserved but always needed, you. They expected you to break. They expected the tears, the begging, the late-night texts that said, "I miss you." They waited for the emotional storm, the anger, the pleading, the collapse. Because that's how it always went before. That was the cycle. They'd push you past the edge, then sit back and wait for you to come crawling back, blaming yourself for the fire they started. And for a long time, that's exactly how it went. You loved too deeply, forgave too icily, and fought to hold together what was never yours to fix. They fed on that. On your emotional availability. Your openness. Your vulnerability. But then one day, something changed, not in them, but in you. A shift. Quiet. Subtle. Sacred. A soul-deep whisper that said, "No more." And just like that, you stopped playing the role. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't try to make them see what they refused to see. You just chose peace. You chose silence, stillness, detachment. And in doing so, you delivered a kind of justice they never saw coming, because it didn't look like revenge. It didn't come with drama or destruction. It came softly, like a door closing, in slow motion, like a breeze that no longer carries your scent, like a song they once loved, now played from another room. Your peace became their punishment, because peace was the one thing they never had, the one thing they never understood, the one thing they pretended to possess, but always searched for in someone else. They lived in chaos, in noise, in control, and you were the sanctuary, the calm in their storm, the light they drained but never respected. You were the softness that made them feel powerful, the presence that made them feel needed. But you were never weak. You were just trying to love someone who was never ready to receive it. And now, in your stillness, in your healing, they are left with the echo of everything they lost in it, because you took it from them. But because they mistook your kindness for currency and tried to spend your soul like it was endless. But it wasn't. And now, you're gone. Gone in a way they never expected. Not physically perhaps, but spiritually, energetically, emotionally. Your heart no longer beats to the rhythm of their chaos. Your mind no longer builds excuses to justify their damage. Your spirit no longer bends just to keep them comfortable. That is the punishment. That is the karma. You're not angry or indifferent. You're not triggered, you're untouched. And to someone who thrives on emotional control, that kind of peace is unbearable. They didn't believe you would ever stop caring. But you didn't stop caring. You just started caring about yourself more. You started choosing your peace over their patterns, your clarity over their confusion, your healing over their havoc. And with that choice, everything shifted, not just for you, but for them. Because without your energy, their power fades. Without your reactions, their manipulation falls flat. Without your attention, their ego begins to starve. And now, they're hungry, not for love, but for control. But the kitchen is closed. The supply is gone, and they are left with nothing but the memory of what they once had and the realization that it will never return. They scroll through old messages, hoping to feel something. They remember your laughter, your softness, the way your presence made them feel less hollow. And it hits them not all at once, but in waves. You were never the problem. You were the light. You were the balance. You were the blessing. And they lost you. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost access to your soul. And that soul, that sacred, glowing, empathic soul, has moved on, not bitterly, not loudly, but beautifully. You see, the kind of peace you carry now, it's not performative. It's not for show. It's not a mask. It's earned. It came through fire, through breakdowns, through letting go of people you thought you couldn't live without, through sitting alone in the dark and learning to love the silence. That's what they'll never understand, because their peace was always borrowed, always extracted from others, always dependent on control. But your peace, it's real. Rooted. Holy. And that's why it hurts them so deeply, because they can't reach it. They can't fake it. They can't manufacture it through manipulation. It doesn't respond to lies. It doesn't rise to provocation. It simply exists untouchable, unshaken, unbothered, and that is their undoing. Not because he set out to destroy them, but because they no longer have the power to destroy you. They can't poke holes in your self-worth anymore. They can't twist your reality to fit their needs. They can't access the parts of you that used to be wide open, because now, you protect those parts like sacred ground. Your boundaries are strong. Your heart is wiser. Your soul is guarded, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You've learned what it means to be your own sanctuary, to find joy in your own breath, to choose softness without sacrificing yourself. And that choice, that transformation, that's the karma, that's the consequence. Because now, every time they think of you, they're met with silence. Not the kind of silence that begs to be filled, but the kind that reminds them what they've lost. The kind that mirrors their emptiness. The kind that reflects back everything they once had, but couldn't appreciate. The kind that whispers, "You can't come here anymore." That's the punishment. Not your pain, but your peace. Not your breakdown, but your breakthrough. Not your revenge, but your release, because you let go. Fully, finally, and now. You soar. Not above them, but beyond them. You exist in a different frequency now. One they cannot enter. One they cannot follow. One they cannot touch. And while they chase new people, new supply, new distractions to fill the void, you create. You build, you heal, you glow. And the world around you feels it. Your peace is loud in its own way. It walks into rooms before you do. It shifts energy. It reclaims power. It sets the tone. Because when a soul like yours finally returns home to itself, it becomes unstoppable. And that, dear empath, dear chosen one, that is the most powerful kind of justice. You didn't have to destroy them. You didn't have to expose them. You didn't have to shout from the rooftops about what they did. You just had to heal. You just had to grow. You just had to become who you were always meant to be. And now, your peace speaks louder than their lies ever did. Your joy silences their cruelty. Your wholeness becomes their reminder. And every time they feel that void, that ache they can't name, that echo they can't silence, it will whisper the same truth over and over again. You didn't lose them. You pushed them away. You didn't break them. You broke yourself trying to break them. And now, you are no longer welcome in their peace. So hold your head high, not with pride, but with quiet power, because your peace is not just yours. It is your boundary. It is your message. It is your justice. It is your legacy. And for the ones who tried to break you, it is their punishment.